The winters in San Diego are gentle and invigorating, offering a much-needed break from the chaos of the rest of the year. However, December of 2019 was anything but refreshing. It was when I first came to understand the dangers of dismissing red flags, no matter how small. My name is Elise, and I've been working as an HR manager for over 6 years. I take pride in maintaining professionalism, creating a healthy work environment, and, above all, setting clear boundaries. When Jeremy joined the team as a project analyst, there was nothing particularly unusual about him. He was courteous, quick to adapt, and seemed to get along well with everyone. Looking back, though, I wish I had picked up on the subtle warning signs sooner. Jeremy's compliments started innocently enough, remarks like, "You're really great at leading these meetings," or, "You make handling everything look so effortless." At first, I thought he was simply being polite. But as the weeks passed, his comments became more personal. One day, after a long staff meeting, he stopped by my office and said, "You make it hard for people not to admire you, Elise," with a smile that lingered just a bit too long. I laughed it off awkwardly and redirected the conversation to work. That should have been the end of it. But Jeremy didn't stop. A week later, he asked me to grab coffee with him after hours. I made it clear that I didn't date coworkers and firmly explained that it was company policy. "I hope you understand," I said. He nodded and replied, "Of course, I didn't mean to cross any lines." For a few days, everything seemed normal. Then the flowers started. At first, it was a bouquet of bright yellow tulips left on my desk with a handwritten note, "For the brightest person in the office." I assumed it was from a team member showing gratitude and thought little of it. But a second bouquet followed, with a more personal message, "I hope this brightens your day as much as you brighten mine." That's when it became clear the sender was Jeremy. I decided to address it immediately. During a private meeting in my office, I said, "Jeremy, I appreciate the gesture, but these gifts are inappropriate. I need to ask you to stop." He seemed embarrassed and nodded quickly, saying, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable." For a moment, I thought he understood. But the next morning, there was a single rose on my desk with a note that read, "I can't stop thinking about you." Alarmed, I reported the situation to my boss, Diana. She was supportive but urged me to handle it carefully since no outright harassment had occurred yet. "Document everything," she advised. "If it escalates, we'll take further action." And escalate it did. A week later, I found my desk drawer slightly ajar. Inside was an envelope containing a photo from the recent company holiday party, a candid shot of me laughing with colleagues. In the corner of the photo, Jeremy stood watching, his expression oddly intense. Attached was a note, "You don't belong with them. You belong with me." My stomach sank. I began questioning every interaction and every glance in the office. Was he watching me? Following me? Things came to a head one evening when I was leaving work late. The parking garage was nearly empty, and my footsteps echoed eerily as I approached my car. I noticed something was off, my windshield wipers were bent, and a small crack marred the driver's side window. Uneasy, I quickly got in, locked the doors, and reversed out. As I did, Jeremy emerged from the shadows, waving with a sheepish smile. I didn't stop. I didn't even roll down the window. I drove off, keeping my eyes fixed straight ahead. I reported the incident to building security. They reviewed footage from that evening but didn't catch Jeremy on camera. "We'll keep an eye out," the guard assured me. One Friday evening, while working late to finish payroll tasks, I noticed a shadow move across the hallway. My breath caught. "Hello?" I called, my voice echoing. Silence. I peeked out the door, but the hallway was empty. Shaking it off as paranoia, I returned to my desk, only to find a note on my keyboard that read, "You shouldn't be here alone." Panic surged through me. I called building security immediately. The guard arrived quickly and escorted me to my car. The next day, we reviewed the security footage. Sure enough, Jeremy had been in the office after hours, rifling through desks, mine included. That was the breaking point. I compiled all the evidence, the notes, photos, and security footage, and reported everything to Diana. The company suspended Jeremy pending an investigation, and I filed a restraining order. Even after Jeremy was terminated, the fear lingered. Every time I walked to my car, I glanced over my shoulder. I varied my routes home and double-checked every lock before bed. Weeks later, I learned through a colleague that Jeremy had moved out of state. There were no further incidents, but the psychological toll remained. Looking back, I see how easily I dismissed the early signs. Jeremy's behavior wasn't harmless, it was deliberate and calculated. The experience taught me the importance of advocating for my own safety. I've moved on, but a part of me will always carry that caution. It's not always strangers who pose the greatest threat. Sometimes, it's the person sitting just across the office. It began like any other Wednesday. The bell rang at 3:15 p.m., signaling the end of another long day of teaching 7th graders. I packed up my things, ready to head home. I'm a creature of habit, and my routine brings me comfort. Call me predictable, but every Wednesday, I stop at the same grocery store on my way home. It's never busy in the late afternoon, and I know the layout so well I could probably shop with my eyes closed. That particular Wednesday was no different. The parking lot was half empty as I arrived, making it feel like the perfect time to relax with some casual shopping. The store was small and local, with a cozy charm despite its dim lighting and slightly worn floors. Grabbing a basket, I made my way to the produce section, glancing at the week's specials written on chalkboards. As I reached for a bundle of bananas, I felt it, a faint prickling sensation, like I was being watched. I glanced over my shoulder and saw a man standing at the edge of the aisle. He wasn't looking directly at me, not yet, but his posture was angled in my direction. I tried to shake off the uneasy feeling and decided to detour to the bread aisle, putting some distance between us. Maybe I'd been reading too many crime novels. But as I turned the corner into the next aisle, there he was again. He wore a dark gray hoodie and jeans. His hood wasn't up, but his head was tilted slightly down, as though he didn't want to be noticed. Our eyes met briefly, and I gave him a polite smile before quickly looking away. He didn't smile back. A knot formed in my stomach as I adjusted my grip on the basket and kept moving. Maybe he's just shopping, I thought. It's not like I own the store. By the time I reached the dairy section, I'd mostly convinced myself I was being paranoid. But then I saw him again, this time by the yogurt display. He wasn't even pretending to shop, he was just standing there. I grabbed my carton of milk and decided I'd gotten enough groceries for one evening. At the checkout lane, I risked a glance over my shoulder. He was near the self-checkout area, still empty-handed. My pulse quickened. Maybe he's waiting for someone, I told myself, trying to stay calm. Or maybe he just doesn't know what he wants to buy. But a small voice in my head whispered, "Leave. Just get out." I hurried through checkout, shoved my receipt into my pocket, and walked toward the parking lot as the sun began to set. As I approached my car, I heard footsteps behind me. Turning, I saw him, now walking at a casual pace, heading in the same direction. I don't think I've ever unlocked my car so quickly. I got in, locked the doors, and started the engine. He stopped a few rows away, standing still as I backed out of my parking spot. His hands were in his pockets, and his eyes were fixed on me. My heart pounded as I pulled out onto the main road, gripping the steering wheel tightly. My house was only 10 minutes away, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling wrapping around me. I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see his face again. What I saw was worse, a silver sedan pulling out of the lot shortly after me. At first, it stayed several cars behind, but as I turned onto quieter streets, it got closer. By the time I reached my neighborhood, it was only 2 cars behind. I turned onto my street and instantly regretted it. My house is in a cul-de-sac, so I couldn't keep driving without making it obvious I was circling back. I pulled into my driveway and turned off the engine, watching as the silver sedan crawled down the street. It made a U-turn in front of my house, but didn't leave. Instead, it parked at the corner, just barely visible from where I sat. Adrenaline coursed through me as I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. I explained the situation, my voice shaking. The dispatcher remained calm, which helped steady me. "Stay in your car or go into your home if it's safe," she said. "An officer is on the way." I stayed in my car, eyes glued to the rearview mirror. A few minutes later, I saw movement. The man stepped out of the sedan and stood next to his car, looking in my direction. He was far enough away that I couldn't make out his expression, but his posture screamed defiance, like he didn't care that I was watching. When red and blue lights flashed down the street, I exhaled shakily, realizing I'd been holding my breath. The man quickly got back into his car and sped off before the police even reached my driveway. 2 officers arrived and took my statement, assuring me they'd patrol the neighborhood and keep an eye out for the silver sedan. "You did the right thing calling," one of them said. "Sometimes these situations escalate if they're not addressed early." That night, I left the porch light on and kept my phone within arm's reach. I wasn't taking any chances. The police never found the man or his car. A part of me wonders if he was just messing with me, maybe some bored troublemaker looking for a reaction. But another part of me knows better. Now, I never shop at the same time every week, and I always park as close to the entrance as possible. I've installed cameras around my house and make a habit of checking my surroundings before heading to my car. It's been over 2 years since that night, but I'll never forget the cold fear of being followed. I've always loved sharing bits of my life online. As a social media manager, it felt natural: photos of my dog Oliver enjoying the Miami sunshine, a sunset walk on the beach, or a perfectly staged shot of my morning coffee. It was fun and seemed harmless, connecting with others over the little moments of my day. But the summer of 2018 changed all that. I learned the hard way that oversharing can invite people into your life that you'd never want there. It all started with a seemingly innocent direct message. The profile was generic, a random palm tree as the profile picture and the username, Coastal Observer. "Hey. Oliver looks like such a happy pup. How old is he?" It seemed friendly enough, just another dog lover reaching out. I replied, "He's 3, adding a smiling emoji. 3. No wonder he's got so much energy. I've seen you guys at Bayfront Park a few times. He loves chasing the seagulls, doesn't he?" That stopped me. I didn't recognize the username, and I wasn't sure how they knew where I walked Oliver. Still, I shrugged it off. I'd posted plenty of photos at Bayfront Park, it wasn't a secret. "Yep, he sure does," I replied, keeping it short. Over the next few days, more messages came. "That new coffee shop you posted looks amazing. Is the outdoor seating dog-friendly?" I froze. I hadn't tagged the location in that post. How did they know where I'd been? I stopped responding, hoping the silence would make them lose interest. Instead, their messages got bolder. "Saw you at the park again today. Oliver looks even cuter in person." That sent a chill down my spine. I hadn't posted anything that day, which meant they'd been there, watching. One evening, as I was settling in for the night, my phone buzzed with another message from Coastal Observer. "You should really lock your windows. Someone could just climb right in." My stomach dropped. I lived on the second floor of a small apartment building, and the idea that someone had scoped out my home made me feel vulnerable and exposed. I stood frozen in my living room, my phone trembling in my hand. Suddenly, The cozy space I'd worked so hard to make my own felt like a glass box, every detail laid bare. My second-hand furniture, the glow of my reading lamp by the window, it all felt like it was on display for a stranger's eyes. I blocked the account immediately, but it didn't make me feel safer. Blocking didn't erase the fact that they had been there, watching. Every shadow outside made my heart race. I checked and rechecked every door and window, but it didn't calm the fear. My dog, Oliver, seemed to pick up on my unease. He curled up at my feet but kept glancing toward the window, ears alert. That almost broke me. I turned off all the lights and sat on the floor, back pressed against the couch, phone in hand, ready to call for help at the slightest noise. Sharing my life online had always brought me joy, connecting with people, seeing glimpses of their lives, and sharing pieces of mine. But now, it felt like everything I had ever posted had been twisted into something sinister. That night, I barely slept. When I finally drifted off, I was haunted by nightmares of someone reaching through my window, pulling back the curtains I'd once left open without a second thought. The next day, I got an email from an unknown sender. The subject line read, "You can't hide, Hazel." Inside was a photo of Oliver sitting by my front door, taken from outside my window. I called my best friend Riley in a panic. "I don't know what to do," I said, pacing my living room as Oliver followed nervously. "You need to go to the police," Riley urged. "This isn't just some troll, it's someone who's watching you." The Miami police were polite, but their response wasn't reassuring. "Unless they've made a direct threat or you catch them in the act, there's not much we can do," the officer explained. Frustrated but determined, I reached out to Derek, a cybersecurity expert I knew through work. Derek jumped into action, tracing the IP address tied to the emails. It led to a local coffee shop's Wi-Fi, confirming that the stalker was nearby. He also discovered that Coastal Observer had used fake photos and stolen content to appear legitimate. The account was a facade, but the person behind it was disturbingly real. "Whoever this is, they're putting a lot of effort into watching you," Derek warned. A week later, I found a package on my doorstep. Inside was a dog collar engraved with Oliver's name and the words, "Forever yours." My hands shook as I held it. It was a message, clear as day, they were escalating. That night, I stayed at Riley's house, unable to sleep. Every creak and rustle outside felt like the prelude to something worse. The next morning, Derek called me with an update. "I think I've found something," he said. The stalker's email address was linked to another fake account, full of beach photos, dogs, and sunsets, eerily similar to my own posts. "This is obsession," Derek said. "You need to take every precaution." With his help, I reported the stalker's accounts to the platforms they were using. One by one, their profiles were shut down. The emails stopped. The messages disappeared. I moved to a new apartment a few months later, this time with better security and a gated entrance. My social media habits changed drastically, no more geotags, no more photos of my apartment, and no more real-time updates. Looking back, I see how naive I was. Sharing little details about my life had felt so harmless. But in the wrong hands, those details became weapons. Though I've moved on, I still wonder who was behind Coastal Observer and what might have happened if I hadn't acted when I did. I've worked from home for years, and let me tell you, spending so much time at home makes you hypersensitive to every little sound outside. Maybe that's why I've developed a borderline obsessive habit of checking my doorbell camera. Between grocery deliveries, Amazon packages, and the occasional takeout order, I've gotten used to seeing drivers come and go. But one experience in December 2018 taught me that even the safety of your own home can be an illusion. It was a brisk December afternoon in Phoenix, which, while rare, isn't unheard of during that time of year. As a tech worker, my days revolved around debugging code and hopping between virtual meetings. That particular day, I was buried in a frustrating bug when my doorbell rang. The camera feed popped up on my phone, showing a man in a brown uniform holding a small package. He looked ordinary, middle-aged, average build, clean-shaven. I'd been ordering holiday gifts and work supplies, so his presence wasn't surprising. But something about him made me uneasy. His uniform was crumpled, and he kept his face angled away from the camera. He seemed nervous. I dismissed the feeling, assuming he'd just had a rough day. When I opened the door, I left the screen door locked. "Can I help you?" I asked. "I've got a package for you," he said, holding out the box. "Who's it from?" I asked, noticing the plain, unmarked packaging. "It's got your name on it," he replied, still avoiding eye contact. His vague responses didn't sit well with me. "Can I see a delivery slip?" I asked. Instead of answering, he shoved the box through the gap in the screen door and walked away without another word. I watched him disappear down the street, no delivery van, no bike, nothing to indicate he was a courier. When I opened the box, it was empty. Just an ordinary brown box with no labels or contents. Confused, I reviewed the footage from my doorbell camera that evening. The man had approached on foot, lingered near the street for a few minutes, then walked up to my door. Something felt wrong, but I didn't have enough to act on, so I let it go. A few days later, just as I was getting ready for bed, there was another knock at the door. The clock read 10:30 p.m. I checked the camera feed and froze. It was the same man. This time, he wasn't holding a package. He stood there shifting his weight nervously, his head swiveling to scan the street. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched as he knocked again, this time harder. I pressed the intercom button. "Can I help you?" I asked. He flinched, startled by the voice. He muttered something I couldn't make out, then stepped back and peered into one of my windows. That was enough for me. "Get off my property, now!" I shouted through the intercom. He backed away, hands raised as if to show he meant no harm, and disappeared into the night. I double-checked all the locks, my unease growing. The final straw came a week later. It was after midnight when my phone buzzed with a doorbell camera alert. Groggy and annoyed, I opened the app, and my blood ran cold. The man was back, crouched by my front door with a flashlight and a small toolkit. He was trying to pick the lock. I immediately dialed 911, whispering to the dispatcher that someone was attempting to break into my home. The dispatcher kept me on the line, asking for details about the man as I watched the camera feed in terror. He worked quickly, glancing over his shoulder every few seconds. My heart pounded as I silently prayed for the sound of sirens. Then, as if sensing he was out of time, the man stood, pocketed his tools, and bolted, just as the faint sound of sirens became audible. The police arrived minutes later, their flashing lights illuminating the street. I showed them the footage, and they promised to increase patrols in the area, urging me to add more security measures. For the next several days, I was a wreck. I couldn't concentrate on work, constantly checking the camera feed and replaying the footage in my mind. Had I been targeted? Was he watching my house, waiting for another chance? The not knowing was worse than the fear itself. A week later, I received a call from the police. They'd apprehended a man matching the description in connection with a string of attempted break-ins. Among the items found in his possession were several fake uniforms, lock-picking tools, and a list of addresses, including mine. Even though he was caught, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. I started taking a self-defense class and became hypervigilant about security. The rational part of me knew I was safe, but the emotional scars lingered. The scariest part? There was no elaborate scheme or high-tech crime. It was just a man with a fake uniform and a knack for deception. Now, I'm much more cautious. I still love the convenience of home deliveries, but I'm far more careful about who I open the door for. And every time my doorbell camera pings, I can't help but feel a pang of anxiety, wondering if the next person on my porch will be as harmless as they appear.